flow is selfless, flow is effortless, and flow is timeless. So all of us know this guy, right? Our inner neurotic Woody Allen. Never goes away, and thank you for the real one, right? For immortalizing our collective neurosis on film, right? But we've all got that. And how hard do we work to try and get rid of him from time to time? The entire pop psychology, new age self-help movement is predicated on getting to your happy place, and he does not get an invite, right? But what happens in a flow state, and this is fascinating, is that that inner critic goes away. And it's not because I'm saying my mantra, it's not because I've done my post-it note affirmations on my bathroom mirror. It goes away because something happens in our brain, and it's called transient hypofrontality. And what that means is transient means just for a little while, hypo means not a lot of, and frontality, the complex neocortical hardware up front where Woody resides. And people used to think, right, oh, we only use 10% of our brains, so if I'm in a peak performance state, I must be using all of it, right? That's not true. I'm actually using less of it. And when they do brain scans on people in flow states, that whole front section goes offline. It literally is not lit up in any way. And that's the secret to getting the relief, to getting those moments of calm.
The first is that flow is universal. It's accessible to all of us everywhere. The next is that for the first time in human history, it's actually hackable. And lastly, once we know what to do with it, and once we can turn it on, we can leverage it to accelerate our learning and to do more good things in a world that's sorely needs it. Abe Maslow called it peak experience. Jim Fixx called it the runner's high. Phil Jackson, the coach of the Bulls and the Lakers, calls it getting in the zone. Miles Davis, John Coltrane, all the other jazz musicians called it being in the pocket, right? Time slows down, the self vanishes. Action and awareness, the beer and the doer merge, and you drop into flow. It can last seconds, it can last a minute, it might even last an hour if we're lucky, but that blink of time becomes a lodestone, becomes our anchor. We spend the rest of our lives looking for it again.
Now, up until really recently, that was as far as it got. That was all we could do. We have these strikes of lightning, yee-haw, amen, and then we just had to twiddle our thumbs and just try spinning the combination lock to see if the shackles that keep us holding back. But that question really got me wondering, which was, how much are all of us holding back? All of the time in our days, how much love a little less, think a little less, work a little less, give a little less, because we are unconsciously holding something back from what our fullest, bravest, most courageous expression could be. It begins with struggle. It begins with suffering. My brain, my inner critic, is wide awake and yammering his head off. My brain waves are in a hyperactive beta state. That's how most of us are thinking most of the time. My nervous system is getting pumped with stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, right? I'm getting primed for fight or flight. I'm struggling. Then I say, screw it. Or I get too tired, or I get too frustrated, or maybe I'm wise enough to know this is coming, and I relax. I turn off my laptop or chuck it out the window. I go and get a beer, or I take a shower. Albert Einstein used to famously paddle his rowboat out to the middle of Lake Geneva, lie flat on his back, and look at the clouds. But whatever I do, I prompt a release. My brain waves shift from hyperactive beta into relaxed, alert alpha, a slower rhythm. Nitric oxide flushes all those stress chemicals out of my bloodstream. And for the kids watching at home, I said nitric oxide, not nitrous oxide. So put the Ready Whip back in the fridge, right? Next, we get to the goods, the actual flow state. Dopamine kicks in, absolute reward. You're like, yes, you're on the right track. Do more of this, pay attention. Endorphins, I feel no pain, right? I'm Superman. And anandamide, right? An endocannabinoid for you glaucoma and lower back pain sufferers in Abbot Kinney, right? So lateral thinking kicks in, and I drop into theta states, which other than Tibetan meditators and people falling asleep, very few of us actually experience when we're doing stuff. It's that relaxed. So there we are, superpowers, optimum feeling, optimum performing. And then finally, that comes and goes too, right? And many of us have learned, right? The true learning comes not when we're doing stuff, that's just gathering data. The real learning comes when we sleep. Memory consolidation of deep delta waves. And we get this beautiful afterglow of serotonin and occasionally even oxytocin. So when you're considering non-ordinary or altered states, one of the first questions is, what do they feel like? What's actually going on in those places and spaces? And one of the challenges in coming up with a good and consistent answer, not just for a specific state, like meditation, or a flow state, or a psychedelic state, is what qualities do they all share? Because each of those communities of practice over decades, centuries, and even millennia have accumulated their own storytelling or content about what the states they access are, what they mean, and where you're supposed to go through them. So for instance, if you're a Buddhist meditator, you will be instructed in all sorts of stages and levels and progressions of non-ordinary states of consciousness, ranging from waking state all the way to white light void, to Buddha consciousness, etc. If I am a peasant farmer in India, and I have a non-ordinary state experience, I might experience Ganesh, right, the elephant god, in a rice paddy. If I'm a peasant in Mexico, I might experience the Virgin of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Right? If I'm a coder in Silicon Valley, I might experience the Matrix and code mode, or this is ones and zeros streaming all night as I bang away on my keyboard. And the reality is that underneath, those experiences are far more alike than the wrapping paper, the narrative wrapping paper of what people see based on culture, custom, biography. And what we attempted to do was create a functional framework that lets us talk about these things as apples to apples and really see the similarities. And what we realize is that because of the neurobiology, there are 4 qualities that tend to arise pretty consistently, regardless of which door you go through to get into these non-ordinary states. And they are selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness, or STIR for short. And selflessness tends to happen because the areas of our brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex, but including additional networks that connect, often turn off or completely light up. Either way, they knock out our everyday waking sense of self-consciousness and self-awareness. So we end up momentarily lost our inner voice, lost our inner critic, lost our Jiminy Cricket, right? And we are in a state of not thinking about our thinking. Timelessness happens for a similar reason. As basically different parts of our brain light up and turn off, our ability to calculate time gets knocked out because it is a comprehensive measurement. It doesn't just occur in one single location in our brain. So when we start knocking out parts of the networks, we lose our chronometer. And all of the neurochemistry, right, focusing, attention, learning, drives our attention. We drop out of daydreaming about the past or the future, and we get absolutely sucked into the immediate present moment. So a feeling of timelessness comes with it. The effortlessness is just, it's no longer about what I'm trying to do. It's not about exerting grit or willpower, which has been, a lot of people have been talking about and writing about these days. And it's literally in the sort of, almost in the biblical sense, sort of not my will, but thy will. I feel when I knock out my self-consciousness, I don't have a voice inside my head, second-guessing, filtering. When I'm not in the past or the future, I'm just in the deep present. When I am effortlessly being propelled, the next thing that consistently seems to happen is we have access to far more information than we do in our regular waking state. And that is when we go from conscious processing, which is very limited and narrow, to unconscious processing, which is faster and vaster. And Dr. David Eagleman, who's at Stanford, who's a friend and a colleague and a board member of ours at the Flow Genome Project, will, constantly makes that case that really it's as if our conscious mind is sort of like the headlines of tomorrow's newspaper, reporting on the reality of today. And when we get into non-ordinary states, because of all of the shifts in brain function and hormones and neuroelectricity, we have access to more of that information in real time. And the results often feel supernatural. People in the past historically have assigned this to the gods, to the muses, to fate, to possession, to angels, you name it, right? We pretty much exhaust the gamut of all the ways we could say this is just too much, this is too cool, it's too inspired, it's too informed to possibly be me.
From altered states to altered traits, hacking the flow state to accelerate human evolution. In the last 50 years in particular, we have experienced what comparative religious scholar Mircea Eliade used to call techniques of ecstasy. And despite all of those benefits, despite all of that advance, right, we're no further than we've always been. It's easier than ever to get high. And it's as hard as it's always been to stay that way. So what's up with that? What's up? Why do we keep pulling an Icarus and falling back to earth? Well, a helpful analogy is to think of our self systems like a colander. And when there's enough flow going into that leaky bucket, temporarily it fills up. For a moment, we experience the wholeness, we experience the wisdom, we experience the insights, and we say, ah, yes, I remember what I forgot. But when the pill wears off, when the workshop ends, when the DJs turn on the floodlights after the final encore, and the spigot of that peak experience ceases, the perforations in our vessel take precedent, and by Monday morning, we're back more or less to where we were. Now, what do most of us do most of the time? We say, yeah, let me go get some more of that. We go try to ring the bell again and again. We become bliss junkies. We become hooked on the state without ever raising the stage. But what if just for a moment we could entertain the project of turning our colanders into chalices? What if we can use those peak experiences to make us whole, to render us holy? What might we do with just one drop? What could we do with the rest? And in Houston Smith's immortal words, might we begin then to transform our passing illuminations into abiding light? Seed have learned to master states of being first, and we can too. So lastly, the so what, right? I mean, it's, what we've talked about so far is still about my own personal experience. But I think the biggest impact and the most exciting possibility we have here is what might we be able to do with flow if we're able to cultivate it intentionally.